Oh,
We
okay. Hi. Hi.
can also hear you.
I was wondering if you could see me.
We can hear you also. You know, I heard that it's Jai's birthday coming soon.
I'm learning the alphabet.
Oh, you're learning the alphabet?
I'm sorry.
Well,
I just finished my first
do like
lesson.
the wow. Do wow. Right?
I can't do it with my
The alphabet is A, B, C, D, E, F,
See,
G,
oh,
H, I, J, K.
I saw E was like that.
I have to go all the ways back again.
Oh, I'm sorry.
A, B, C, D, E, F, no, G.
I don't have the same.
G is gun.
G is like that.
No, G is like a gun.
Oh, they didn't show it like
And
that.
H is two fingers.
And that's what? That?
H is two fingers.
Oh, yeah. I haven't learned H.
H. Then I is the pinky.
I know that.
J,
Oh,
J, you go like that. You go like that for J. And then K is like that. You make a K. Then L, L, M, we've done three fingers. And N is two fingers.
oh, this is exercise.
Yes. O is like that.
I don't
P,
know.
P is like that.
Would probably keep you from getting arthritic.
Yes.
Yeah. But you can also get the hands talking to each other. You can make up.
You make A, B, C, D.
Just like you can type on the pad and send messages, you can also type to each other in some weird way. See, once you recognize it, then you also recognize it without even seeing it anymore. You recognize that that's what you're doing. So even if your hand is in your pocket,
Oh,
you could think something to yourself if you want and move your hand, you see. So once you know the sign language, and then also if you then go into American Sign Language, it's called ASL, and then you learn the movements.
that I'm eager to learn.
Well, that'll be interesting if you learn the face movement, because it is a face exercise.
Oh,
You know, and the premise of a lot of the face exercise is rolling the tongue into a ball, exercising the tongue muscle, and keeping it flat against the bridge of the mouth. Because they say dentistry has realigned the face so much that you can even see it sometimes. You can pull it this way and that way if you have teeth missing or something. So then they say,
I come.
you got to give your neck a kiss. You know, I mean, look how heavy a job it's been for 80 years now. Okay, to hold your head on its neck.
Yes.
You need a rub. So just logic would be one day, hey, why don't you give your neck a rub?
Oh, I do that all the time. I mean,
So let's say a lot of what is happening is acquainting ourselves with our own existence in some way. And I'm not saying taking it for granted as if it's bad or good. Somehow the pursuit in one's life presumes a kind of healthiness of one's body and being. When one runs into something that they have to then re-examine, depending on the experience of re-examination, the re-examination affects then the continuity again. Something is awake. And as it is more awakened, it is more you who are making the life, not so much it being and so it then starts to seem that naturalness is the way to go, because one has been somehow living naturally. And But when we look at our life actually, from the perspective of saying, how the hell did I survive all that? And what was this? And what I should have took care of that. I should have given her a kiss and said goodbye. Or, okay, you understand. So let's say you fly over your life where you have no power over it. You see why it didn't happen, why this did happen. You see how written the story is to some degree. Because you would have needed this future perception to be that person you're talking about, to be in the story. You saw in the story that person is pushed away somewhat in order to have the experience. Then this person is projected into the future, reflecting on this experience from this place. And so you see the phases of existence. And you see that the active principle at a certain point is built into the body, the system, as a child is cared for, is raised into the life, experiences it, then goes into an adulthood where they actively live the life. And supposedly they then have the other phase of their life where it is not an active principle, but it's a love of life that runs through the story. So it's also a love of life that also ends the story in the way that it doesn't have end like that, but obviously as people it has end. There's an event waiting, but what it does have is a parallelness of time and space. And somehow one has magically found themselves in a situation where that's allowed. Not by law or this or that, but there's a common agreement of humanity between people so far that we know. That we are, at the same time that we're living in it, we're deeply witnessing it, the itness of it. And you're experiencing deeply, at times perceptively, that one is in the story but not of the story. But that one is being compelled or invited into the story from a different place. Not because it's mellow or this or that. But somehow there's a truth that runs through the story. And you see that with all the explosions and breakups and flip-ups, and you see there was a true feeling that did run through the story. And it remained a true feeling. It still was looking for that true feeling. And it's not truth or laid out so easily. But you know when it's not. And so I feel that when we were talking last time about Shiva and Shakti being virgins and celibates, and yet they made love and fought all the time, supposedly. His premise was that he was, as a celibate, he made love only when he was in love. And she said that she made love only when she was in love, and that was her virginity that each time was. So they kind of separated what was really happening, supposedly, why lovemaking was supposedly sacred or this or that at the same time. Not only institutional, to have the continuity and to have family, but there was some exchange that took place in the feeling that one hoped for, that one yearned for, that one supposedly within one, that there was an aspect of in oneself that was on the lookout for a connection in the literal world. A train's passing by, a glance. Can one make a life around such a philosophy, Urja? That,
Yes.
that everything came out of a glance, or a face in the crowd. The crowd was just a crowd. Then all of a sudden someone looked at you and you
Yes.
saw, and somehow a conversation.
Yes.
Is that too much?
No, it's just being present.
Well, can you tell me the logic of your relationships then? Were they logical?
No.
Do you think it must have been some strange, what were they then? What were the arrangements?
I think it was a movement, an energetic movement, an attraction for not necessarily as a lover, but as a person. There are people you feel attracted to, or they are, it's like it's an instant,
You didn't,
easy communication.
you didn't use some magic or something,
No.
or perfume or something.
Oh,
So you
not
mean you went
perfume.
into it as an honest French woman into the story. So you didn't do "Hey baby." So let's say if you had a mantra, would it be "Hey baby"? No.
Oh, now, yes.
No, some French version. If you then entered into the story as you, but obviously entering into the story means that somehow you've had the rehearsal of you. Now, let's say you have the capacity to see all the aspects of you. You could see you as a woman, you as a girl, you as this, you as a mom, you could see through that scope, you could see you. And of course, we're fantasizing, but now the way it's going now, where people can do their own films and podcasts or whatever, it's not so far-fetched, but we just see you. And you see that you have glimpses in time of this, that there is a you and a you and a you. Okay. You can count just quickly 15 yous, and you're you. If you're a friend to you, you're friendly to that you, and then all of the other yous are the yous that you may need for the moment. But supposedly the person who knows you deeply, that you, and then the other yous, you happen to be French, you happen to be this, you happen to be that, but you happen to be.
Yes.
None of these things stick to you. Is she French? She said, well, she's not exactly French. She's got French in her, and okay. You understand? So French would just be an outer description, but basically that is the expressions you have available to you in a quick reference.
Yeah.
I was interested in this exploration that the person mentioned about the part of the brain that has memory without time in it.
Yeah.
When it has the experience, it doesn't matter if it's 50 years, 20 years, 20 minutes or something like that, because there is a whole nerve conduit that are constantly replenishing themselves around this, but this experience is there. And in some cases, it may even seek out a repetition of that experience that caused the trauma. The trauma may be like a cancer having a life of its own. But very weird stuff. Once you start to look into the so-called, but then you bring it close to home, and you see that sometimes when relationships break up, there's a kind of spite that goes on. Not the cooperative as much as there's a spite or a hurt, or the one won't say this. And I mentioned a few weeks ago a book called Spite.
Oh, yeah.
and that it may have been that the Bernie people voted for Trump because that she was taken over by Hillary. So they voted for Trump out of spite. So he was just following the history of spite. And generally in relationships that break up or whatever, there's an underlying spite that may be the rationale that the lawyer is supposed to have to measure to see that it's legal. And they say, why? And like that rabbi said, if the person still thinks of you in that way, dreams of you, do you have to give that a consideration? And I say, probably people do give that a consideration as their situation is changing or shifting, that they know that there's still a feeling that runs through the story. But we also know that we come to a point where that feeling is not a possessive, it's a feeling. And and so what does it mean when it's from a feeling? Is kind of demanding a human response, not a bullshit trip. There you share the love. And the logic of their circumstances, spite is a reflection of the hurt that comes with their love. In fact, it may even be evidence of a true love, or true feeling at one point. But at the same time, it's locked in the story as a possessive.
Yeah.
When there's a certain point when it's perceived as a shared experience.
Mm-hmm.
And but perceived, not in the absence of perception, then it'll be legal pressure, this and that. But in the absence of the perception is the writer of the story, more or less. It's not around doing, it's around seeing something. That a feeling allowed something to take place. And that also was a premise of deep acting when there was a shared feeling around the subject matter, around the issue, around you saw then that the feeling made its own, when the feeling was there, it created its own reality. As the feeling shifts, the literal reality becomes the reality, the literalness of it, not the creativeness of it. But we are still moving in a world that from one perspective that we'll have in ourselves, that we'll see that it has been a creative process that we've gone through. And that it has assumed many, it resembles more of many movies that one has made than a literal continuum. And in the art of living one's life, and in the art of making movies that reflect one's journey or one's life, you have access to dimensions of it that are hidden, except to the creative mind. And I say, why the creative mind? Because the creative mind, at one point, in order to explore, it's accommodated normally what the ego would fear. And the creative mind is not only linear and towards the future, but it explores the present. And it finds the future and the past and the present in a parallel way. So when I explain that you run into your mother's diary or something after her death and you see a woman or whatever, of course she was a woman and everyone knew she was a woman, but your discovery of something kind of opens up a dormant aspect. In order for you to continue, you had to suppress certain elements. So anytime there was this danger to the form's continuity, they would suppress other pressures in itself in order to survive. But it was still balancing the survival with the freedom. Well, it's an interesting exploration between the literal circumstance and then the parallel life. And as you're in situations like we are, you see that there's a convergence of forces. The literal you and the parallel inward you are becoming one person. Okay. And how does it look then, Urja? Can one then put their hand into the pasta bowl of life and they say, do you want to give it some shape or something? You feel with your body, and does that make sense to what I was explaining? That happened to me the other day, where in the vaccine question, the body then laughed at me as if it was my question to answer when the body had the majority of the voice. Let the body speak. Okay. And it doesn't, not that it speaks like that or whatever, but then you kind of become aware of something that's normalized. One is kind of negotiating between the literal world and the creative world, or we'll call it spiritual, but that becomes hokey when they point it out because, but in fact it is in flux. It doesn't have rules and laws like that. It has more of the movie watching element to it, where you're touched by your inability to do anything about it. So it may make you laugh, it may make you cry, it may make you mad, but somehow, without the doer, there is a perceptive sense that is set off. But if you act out, you see you've gone further than the creative. But if you're touched, so there is some evidence that in one's lifetime, if there's experiences where you're touched, and touched is not spelled out, but that somehow that experience is now part of the mass of one's own brain. It exists there. And there's some, because to the brain, supposedly the outer and the inner are not separated so much by the persona. So if there are hints outside or fragrances or whatever. So what an interesting thing to fly over. And then it's nice to fly out of it also. Understand? And then get on with the day. But let's say in moments you start to visit where that dopey question has some meaning, because you then feel not so much the medical idea of continued life, but first having a perspective on it, because their predictions are that you're close to life and this and that. But what we are in seemingly is a phase of this weird journey that you've been on. And this is as weird as any of the other aspects of the journey that you're on. And you're kind of being left with nothing to do as part of it. Maybe, like you say, that guy grabbed you the other day, although it can't come out of a grab. It has to come out of some kind of, hey, baby, at this stage.
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So then it may be that...
And I was really wanting to be as kind as possible and be patient also.
Look, let's say the phases of life. Let's say the phases of your life, you can say the first love affair, thanks, mommy, or whatever. In retrospect, you can see.
Oh, I adore her.
Then you see the next phase where you became a woman and you shared it, and then it became relationship. You see that the hey baby, you see the next phase of the life was to live it, to have children, to do that thing. And then you see that the next phase of the life, it's all around, but love was the thread that ran through it. And you kind of also understand it without it being over schmaltz love, as if it can be described, there's variants of it. You can see as deeply as one can see. But let's say this passage, if you shared a love affair, and in that love affair can be as dopey as talking to your body in a way of, hey, baby, or something without it. But let's say that one somehow we're utilizing the dumbness of saying, hey, baby. But in Hey Baby, we're talking about every science show on the body. We're talking about all the cells and the immune systems and the heart rate and the brain rate and this and that, all of these being active. And I say, from that perspective, can one, from the creative perspective, give shape to where you're at with something?
Yeah.
If you had a last pizza to make, what kind of pizza would you make?
Pizza, you said?
Yeah, well, we'll use it as dough throwing up in the air. Let's say
goat cheese, basil. Fried tomatoes.
That's why I was going to say tomato needs.
Derek, what do you say? Can one, without literalizing it, because it's not literalizing, obviously, life will outwit us again by falling down into the bathtub or something like that, you know. But let's say we're not talking about how to die literally, but we're kind of understanding that to perceive living and dying is to kind of see yourself in the mirror and then not in the mirror, and you see aspects of it, but you then start to see as you, let's say as you're getting older and you look in the mirror and you see your skin or something, you see something now that the mirror sees. And you find out through the mirror what it sees. And you start to see something somewhat different. That there's a whole acting school around that, but you start to see accidentally what the mirror sees without a trip. And somehow a glimpse of that you bring back into the literal life. No more than you can see, though. But let's say creatively it interrupts the logical flow. And you see the story how it will be seen in time. And so you see that time in the moment. Yeah. And you get glimpses of your life that are parallel to, like there's literal time, but you also see we've just been through a virus for the last 14 months. What happened? Where, what's going on? Like a bomb, the earth was bombed.
Yeah, and the killing, yeah.
They dropped the bomb on the earth from somewhere. Okay. And everybody says, what the, who that is? These are guys, this is doing it, that's doing it. But they just dropped this mystery bomb one day. And then actually they started to say it was coming through pizzas, actually. Right? It was happening in Italy. Don't eat the pizza, they were saying. So, and we're in it, of it, where are we? So we each have a variable. Was it because of yoga that you didn't pass away this year?
No.
No, was it because of some device you had, Derek, that you didn't go this year? You learned how to breathe well, or clap your hands, or pray,
Seems so.
Or Netflix. Did Netflix save your life?
It seems love comes in often for that.
Okay.
Not often, but it comes in for that, it seems.
Okay, so you can see it flitting about. You can actually see, while the story is literally there in front of you, you can see love and loss. You can see everything. You can see what the guy described to me. He said, you know, when you see the movie, you're seeing maybe 400,000 photographs appearing to be a movie, but you're just seeing these photographs moving at that speed. But those who took it took like 240,000 individual photographs to create a scene.
Hmm.
And they're stills somewhere. So when you see both the scene from, it looks like it's moving.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that they rehearsed, they reinvented, they recreated, they kept one scene, they didn't keep another scene. Okay. And they created a flow. And they give the premise then that once you see it, the flow is natural. And so therefore, when you see the movie, you can see it could go through 300 years of its own history or something like that, and the flow is naturalized in a few hours. And you start to see what's compartmentalized within the person's being and utilized as a constant. It is not, it's discovered. And when it's discovered, there's another dimension that releases the story from one's possession.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that one can see or experience within the form only what one can experience within their own karmic circumstance without it somehow running into critical mass. And critical mass is sometimes a lover. That somehow running into the lover or the whole relationship to that feeling or affection or whatever starts to create particles around it that only the people involved really understand. Others may intuit or see aspects of it, but only the people who shared the feeling somehow, in presence and in absence, have a kind of floating connection. In absence and in presence, in memory. And sometimes when the other comes up, supposedly the other then, the one that was once together is then the other comes up, you see that the other is not some separation out there, but there is in fact a private space somewhere that a conversation goes on in its own way. And as you start to perceive your own workings, you start to see that the life is not your possessor. But it does require some level of sanity to perceive that, because generally it avoids perceiving its underlying elements, one's own life, not as an ownership, but that you then become aware that the you in you is caring for something. It resembles pregnancy, it resembles this, it resembles that there's something other than you happening
Yeah.
that may have you reflect on you and what is happening for you in your body. But you see, there's a phase of one's life that you have to consider the other into your existence, whether it amplifies your existence or whether, and so you enter into a human historical story. But you see in your own life in retrospect the journey that it's been and the phases that it's been. And you see the thread running through it, but you see almost different movies with the same thread running through it, where it's you, not as literally you, but you running through the phases of your own life. And then seeing the elements of those close to you that are thou or they're in thou relationships, where it was shared, where there were intimate conversations. You see that thread also runs if you run into a person in the past where you've shared that feeling. that the relationship to that feeling is also a relationship. And even if it's years and years later, the accidental, you see, you're still in time with that person. That time shifted. Even though it may be 30 years later, you see that for you, if you bump into each other, you're still in that moment in time. Even though it's been parallel all along. So the discovery of what is normal, but the discovery of it shows that it's not so normal. It is that the life, in fact, is so compelled, at such a creative act, that the millions of accidents, seeming accidents that were necessary to go into a life and a happening, and meeting this one and accidentally, okay. And yet when you see the grid from another place, you see that accidents are an aspect of the experiment. It looks like accident to the logical mind. But as a matter of fact, if you look at the cellular structure, if you look at the bacterial structure within the hormonal structure, if you look at the workings of you see the dynamic of this interaction. And you see that outwardly they're trying to say, I am somebody, I am this. But the recognition is, I am somebody. The perception of it, not so much an assertion of it, but the perspective that somehow weirdly you got to be Derek. How the hell did you manage that? How did you manage to make a character land in San Francisco as Derek? Let's say you were flying overhead without a form, and we were flying past and you decided to become Derek. And I said, are you sure about this? And you'll arrive as Derek. And you'll have all the files on Derek, where he comes from, what happened, what street, what his social security number is. You'll have everything. You can probably learn in a few hours. Will it appear different if you just arrived as Derek with all the information?
Hard to say.
Well, you understand that that's supposedly the trick of our interaction, our relationship, even though we're joking about it and this and that, you see, but you see all the attempt was there in theater and all the creative arts was to somehow arrive. And I was listening to a choral with a guy, I'll send it to you, the information, but I think for 64 hours, he just says the same thing over and over again.
Whoa.
But there is that school where remember I mentioned where I think 40 people just start with ha ha, all start at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And supposedly the script will find itself, it's not pre-scripted.
Mm-hmm.
So it all started from this feeling, this space. And then it became this whole orchestration or whatever that's, I have it here. But it's, so at one point we were listening to immersive music like that came out of Pranath. Where the premise again was, they said, well, why did all this happen? I said, there was a time during that Woodstock time and that period of time and right before it or whatever, where friends hung out together and relationships came out of that. So people were fools for love in an immersive. And so when these Indian gurus came over, they came around, there was a logic to it. At the time, coming into town, what was happening in the country, what was happening in the situation. Everything seemed to be up in the air. And then somehow shifting and going to India. But most of the Indian gurus that came to America kind of woke up in America. You know, because they came to a situation, okay, where people were fools for love. It was a kind of big fools for love, instant relationship, trying things, all kinds of weird things became the norm. And kind of experimenting with certain drugs as part of being able to do that was the norm. Okay, so it was a phase of that life that entered into their life that somehow shifted the plane, because in those days, at that time, relationship didn't come out of so much the history. They came out of more the accident of being in one place at a certain time, or having a similar experience, or something shared deeply, or whatever. And as a logic of the circumstance that you were in, maybe marriage or literalizing the marriage, but somehow you see the energies, you get a glimpse of the energies. And it's not so much that the energies are hidden from you before it literalizes as relationship. It's in fact what is available to you as relationship is starting to respond to each other is more the actor not knowing the whole story. Having a glimpse of a larger picture being lived while one is living their life. And not because, and their dreams are a dream of something that is actually there. They're touching something that really exists. They may literalize it as their dream or as their hope or their, but you see there's a pre-existing. Once your boy says Stanford and he says this one and electric cars and this and that and playing an instrument, you start to see a world opening up. But you also see conceptually, the person can conceptualize. So what I meant was that somehow our kids are born free to find their voice, but they're coming from the human. So can one ever see more than a peep of their own existence? Can one see their life from these seats in the front row? Derek, what do you say? Not the, I said, well, it would depend on the motive. If the motive of continuity was there, but if the motive of discovery was there, then you would have to acknowledge that your own life is what discovery is about. You discover some elements of your own existence. And when you do discover that, it changes the plane. It then changes the plane from survival to exploration. So when you then start to shift the plane, you see that time is not only literally ahead of you, but that time also can be shaped if, again, there is a creative feeling or exchange or literally, or even a new Netflix coming on, that, you know, the absurd or whatever the form that is laughing at you. But let's say you perceive a dialogue in the normal breathing in and breathing out of your life, of the humorous conversation between living and dying. And it can be reduced as to what to watch, or hey baby, or you could even say, I have an idea, let's make believe we have an argument today. And he said, okay, What should we do? Can you manufacture an argument, Derek?
Seems,
Would have to be real.
or yeah, I mean, the arguments seem to come about effortlessly sometimes.
Yeah, they're not that hard.
You mean, why you, who the hell do you think you're?
I'm doing my best here, you know, but
You're doing your best not to be cool as a cucumber.
yeah, it's funny. If I look back at it, it seems like everything that I've ended up in has been a stumble disguised as like a confident stride, you know.
Let me see, do confident. Let's see, watch this, Kai, see if he's, act confident for a couple of minutes.
That's pretty
Well,
good. That's pretty good.
well, I don't know. Say, how about Mother Jumper or something like that? You know, you would like to be cool and confident.
Yeah, comfortable and easy and all that would be nice, but I also recognize that isn't always the case. So
You mean that somehow you have to manage the body again if it gets like there are kind of instinctive responses to something. You feel flight or fight or something like that.
for sure.
And
Yeah,
so
which is where that brain thing comes in, right? Trauma response.
yeah, well, it depends now somehow how close you are to the persona that you are in the moment. So that's why I say, if in fact you're some authority and it's coming in your face, you may have to act. Look, Mother Jumper, if you take away my space, there is a human space that we've agreed to. And so, okay, somehow without there being an agreement, somehow if you had a fight with someone, you kind of agreed what the boundaries were. That's remarkable, isn't it? That somehow this is kind of written into the script. And then what would create a reaction in the other person if you said it must also be written in the script.
Yes.
And so that's what that purpose of that book called Spite was. When it was purposeful spite, it wasn't accidental spite. It was spite in order to have the different kinds of reaction.
It's tough to do.
Well, they even were saying biblically, you can see in the Bible, they did things out of spite. That they would know that they would get the goat of the other if they said this or did this or that, you know. And even families did spite with each other as a natural thing. And that the person would get the message, even though they say, no, I never did that. The person would be able to deny because it wasn't obvious except to the person who received it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they say, holy, then it must run through politics. It runs through the Bible. It runs through every day. It runs to buying something, a transaction or something. So you see, and that the message does come, there has been a kind of way of sending messages without it sending messages, literally, that the phone has always existed. The cell phone has always existed in some way, in memory and hurt and experience. And they say that much of the politics of the world now is going on in spite. They're spiting each other. And
Yeah.
And it seems logical. What do you say? How do you explain it? How do you explain then being Derek? What trick did you use? It's very hard to get an apartment in San Francisco. What magic did you use? What mantra did you use?
Seems I had a lot of help to get to where I'm at.
Yeah, well, something, you mean something up there that was looking out for you?
You could put it that way.
Okay, so let's say you beam up with that. Do you feel that urge that something up there, somebody up there likes you?
I mean, I question it sometimes, but I do feel that, yes.
That somebody up there likes you. That sounds weird though, doesn't it? But
Well,
let's
it's,
say Kai.
I think as a guardian angel or
I don't think I'd survive without that.
Okay, so
Belief.
we can even say it was dumb the way he said it, but he said it honestly. He said, somebody up there likes me. It could be his mother or whatever, the prize fighter. But let's
Yeah.
say that became a premise of a life that was kind of different, one who used more art or something or created their life. Or some events happened to them where they had an unusual life then. And so in that sense, there's always moments in retrospect when you say, there's something like, and then when I say, how would you describe this life? Then I say, well, holy shit. It's really holy. You see how deeply there was a holiness that ran through it. And then you run into such weird bullshit moments. I mean, so it's holy and shit at the same time. You know that somehow, you know that you're going through the shit for a holy reason. You're going through the bullshit for a holy reason or something like that. And so you are merely juggling this existence in some way. And I can't say merely, but I'm saying that basically you see that one is managing, that the life itself is a creative act. And there is something about being into it and not being into it that are really measurements of oneself. Not literally, but like taking one's temperature. You see, your temperature at times will tell you how much you're into something or not. So we are now aware that there is a participation, and the body is not a stranger, but is somehow creatively part of the act. It's not its specific recognition as much as it is a kind of creative recognition. And so I'm saying then, Ursha, can one then goof with it and shape it like a pizza? Or not literalize it,
no,
but
yeah.
say your perspective has meaning to your body. If I say to my elbows, you're still into it, elbows, you want to go on for another year and a half? And okay, it said okay. And my knees but my foot says, bathe my foot more, and I'll go along with another year. And okay, let's say I negotiate neck, give me another year, you're gonna be a ball buster. And says, okay, but you gotta give me a rub and kind of stop trying to knock me out.
Yeah.
It's only natural. Okay. What's happening to the neck and everything and the sun and where everything is pretty natural. But can one, without it making it too schmoey, see that schmoey is also okay? And when you say that there's an accidental momentary love affair around the vegetable garden, and you're going to inherit 2 children, that should be Academy Award performance for you. But any advice, Guy?
Oh, well, that'll give her at least 10 more years in the body, I would say.
Okay, well, she should probably have a stash. You should have $12,000 stashed, Raja. See if you can get 12,000 just to stash under the bed or something.
Okay. So the day I die, I can spend all of it.
It's not the day you die, it's just that it's hanging around.
I know, I'm kidding.
You may decide to live. You mean kind of do like that, take a trailer somewhere? Well, you can't drive anymore, right? So you have to take a bike or something.
A walk.
You may take a bike trip. So we'll see. You think you could bike down here?
Excuse me?
Can you bicycle down here? Can you go that far?
Oh, no.
Wow. That's over mountains.
Downhill. Well, you think that you can go on a bike to Boulder?
Sure.
So Mary thinks that she can do it
I think maybe she
I think
could.
very good.
but she's got an electric bike too. Well, you have an electric bike also, don't you?
But I have to recharge it pretty often.
Me too. Me too.
You two could do it together.
We can do it together. Come and get you.
I hope this doesn't sound too weird to folks who may be listening in, but it's we're having conversations about living and dying and normal living and dying that's actually happened. And we're even talking about the absurdity of a friendly conversation to what one presumes to be their own body. And you may find out lately that your body, what you're calling your body, has a mind of its own, oftentimes. And sometimes it's like your child or something like that. You may find out that it's not only your child, but the person has a mind or feeling of its own. So there are moments that somehow happen to you that interrupt the status quo, that force you to reflect on your body, not only from a curative or overcoming it or as a possessor, but from an affection, a perceptive infection, that you may literally know what the body is as your body, but when something happens to you and forces you to reflect on it, you start to see the exploration in your body is what's missing. To discover your body as not your body, but when it is interrupted and you reflect on it, discovery changes the plane. It awakens a dormant aspect. And I've used that as an illustration. There are moments in a diary or something like that, or reflection, where you discover what everyone else knew. You discover a mother who wasn't your mother, but a woman who happened to be your mother. And everyone knew that she was a woman who happened to be your mother. You knew as a mother who happened to be a woman. But then you see the discovery of her womanhood releases the story from its possessive. And you see parallel to your existence, there were other existences going on that you discover accidentally in time. That while you were living a literal life that came from this person and that person, this person wasn't exactly this person. This person had a life. This person had a depth. This person existed on many levels. So this person then that is included in your history of them is missing a mutual experience in retrospect. You see, you come more from a mystery than a history. And when you perceive the mystery that you've come from, you say, holy shit, my mother went through that. I saw that, or did this. I didn't know that she had that hipness in her or whatever. You know? So then I say, okay, you see a scene going down that releases the story from your possessive to discovery. discovery changes it from karma or repetition to dharma, which is more the perfume of something. That you're not inherited any longer a pattern of behavior. It releases the story from its continuity. You see that what we inherited then from our parents is the elements of survival. But then you see that an event happens that releases this literal survival story. And you see then the life resembles more of kind of poetry or mystery than history, where you discover the life you've lived from a different place. So I think that you have, in friendship or whatever, have to create that dialogue anyway. And so that's why I'm saying even kidding around with the guy there and the family, I'm not talking about the literalization of it, but the opera of it, the weirdness and poetry of it, and the normalcy of it, that you could instantly become a grandma without having met anybody. That's the same way you got the virus, and the same way you got the shots, is you just had to sit there, and all of a sudden, next week, you may become a grandmother of 2 kids and an angry ex-wife. Okay. Do you want the movie? Doesn't pay much. But would you like to try the movie? No, these folks don't understand how heavy you are. So you're no slouch either. So if they're going to inherit this old lady, then they're also going to have to kind of be, you're going to have to give them 300 readings. You want the job, Urja?
I don't know.
I don't know either. But I don't know, that's what they say that the first Hebrew name of God was. Adonai, is I don't know. So when they tried to make a big thing, they said, well, what does it mean? They said, look, I don't know. You could see some films where a person gave up and they said, I don't know. And so let's say they're having a direct relationship with well, you should hang around for another, let's say September.
That's not very long.
I'll try that.
Mhm.
No, you want it longer than September then?
I don't know.
You can always renew. If something's happening in September, you could say, oh, sure, let's make it till next September or something. Like that.
Okay.
So let's say that your relationship is to, there's something truly happening for you or truly that you're interested in or can throw yourself into. And so you're measuring your time that way just as much. How much time would you need to do a project? And we say, how about just trying something till September, growing the plants or doing the gardening till September? And I say, okay, you're buying 6 months and you're letting the growing of the plants and whatever weirdness comes out of the growing of the plants be a medium, creative medium for you. But if you're in a medium with the wife and the this and the that, you are a medium for an honest conversation if they wish. You're not in the story. Is that okay? That somehow, the impossibility is that they're stuck in spite. And so they run into you and they're stuck in spite. So you understand, even if there's a relationship with you, it may come from spite. But at the same time, there's an underpinnings. But if they want this old lady now, kind of has to be no bullshit. because the love is no longer possessive, that's all. And it's not that it's all to dismiss it. So you see, hurt is an aspect of the movement. As you disengage, you've disengaged an identity also as relationship shifts. So there are processes that are happening. But your going down there is also, your presence is inviting a reflection. A truck just pulled up. So is anyone else on except us folks? Or
We have people on YouTube. Anybody want to say hi? Magic Sufi has made a couple comments. 6 people. Anybody want to say hi? Go ahead in the chat.
was anything said?
No, not yet.
I think there's a delay.
Yeah, there is a delay, so it takes a couple minutes. Pacific Vibration. Hi, Danny. It's Carrie. Carrie's on.
Oh, hi, Carrie.
And I have to put my glasses on. Romel, Montana.
Okay.
Says
Well, I'm glad that Carrie's on. Can you hear Carrie?
Well, Carrie, he won't, unless he gets on Zoom, he won't be able to talk back to you, but he can chat. Sophia says hi. Hi, Danny, everyone.
Okay, and then and Derek. Now, I'm talking about what's touching me here is a question of hurt. When we talked a bit earlier about spite, you saw that spite somehow lives on in a circumstance as like almost as an aspect of a relationship that may live on. Because somehow as the relationship shifted in time to memory, you see, if you do run into that person, you're meeting them in that kind of time when that period finished. Even though their lives have been parallel all along. So let's say as our lives are parallel to each other, there's a moment when accidentally it'll appear, but there are forces inherently in the circumstance of those characters converging. Because they're not past as if they don't exist, they are parallel. But stored in part of us. But there's a moment in memory and interaction where you see how many levels you're really existing on. While you're literally you living your day, you see what the collaborative of the body is. And you see what the collaborative, that there's an organized you as a self with a social security number, and that is you with a history. And you come from these two people and you're born in that place and that, and this is the color of your skin and this is your gender, so it's all predictably, and you see it has been predictably carried out. You have been faithful to the social security number and the identity and the situation. But once you see that there's a grid laid out for you, that becomes a critical mass. Once you perceive that the story is not literally the story of you, it interrupts the status quo and it causes some kind of reflection. Now, reflections have different elements to it. Certain reflections create a reaction where we reassume an identity in reaction to the experience. But there are some experiences that required some elements of soul searching, where it wasn't victimization yet, but it was doorway of perception. So depending on the thing that interrupted the status quo and caused reflection, if the level of reflection caused reaction immediately, one had an aspect of the experience as a survivor. But as one was thrown deeper for a loop, one was thrown into other dimensions of the experience that were not possessives. You kind of met the mystery. And to the degree that you met the mystery, you took some of the experience of the mystery into the story with you. Depending on the reaction, if the reaction was there, you assumed an identity that then literalized the circumstance. But as you went deeper than that, or thrown deeper than that, you then had dimensions of that that were not your possessives. You experienced humanity to some degree. You experienced the story from another perspective. And that you visited death, not the literal death for yourself, but where there is not a story laid out in front of you yet. You re-enter the story from a different place.
Yeah.
And so you see that one has the experience that they're capable of having at one point, but once it is awakened, that becomes, in fact, the life is no longer dominated by a continuum. Let's say if one is a doctor around that and you're having agreements with someone who's passing and living, and what would they like, and where are we? And let's say you have this schmaltzy idea that you can stylize the movement. The person admires your readings or whatever. Says, okay, this is what's happening. You're perceiving it through friendship what's happening. Maybe even laugh at it while it's happening, while you're snoring or something. Okay. So let's say you do have that goofy understanding that somehow there's an affectionate relationship to the dying. That's the other phase of the life, that it was all somehow based on weird love affairs. The whole movement was based on weird love affairs, and you weirdly trusted your mother to love you, and you fell in love with this husband and that guy, and went with Rajneesh, and just based on you were free to have love affairs. And you see the different phases of the body, the different phases of the existence. And you see this phase of the existence is still around, a kind of loving passage. That somehow the story that you shared was falling in love or sharing a love, or there was somehow a love ran through the story. And so you see the different phases of your life. And they would have said, let's say you would have looked back in your life and you say, how do I get out of this marriage? And they say, I have an idea. There's a guru called Rajneesh. And you're going to tell a grown woman with 2 kids that she's going to fly out to Rajneesh and party for a year with 7,000 weird characters?
Hard work.
Should say, okay, I'll take it. I'll try it. If they would have said to me, okay, look, you'll fly out to Oregon with 7,000 other weird dudes and this guru driving around Rolls Royces. And okay. They say, okay, let me give it a try. I think I can pull that off. Do you know what kind of training you would have had to go through to make a movie of that, to pull that off? And you just stepped into the story. So let's say, and how did you get to Colorado there? You stepped into the story somehow, and now there's a Colorado life. And all of it has been pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
From hurt to love to this, it's had all the experience. Are you still into it, or you feel like it's more like if it was a painter, who would it be? You don't want to do Van Gogh, no.
No.
Or you don't want to do anguish.
How, what?
Anguish.
Anguish.
Yeah, many of them somehow,
I
because
don't need for that.
let's say, as you painted at that certain periods, you discovered hidden worlds.
Hidden.
So then there are whole schools of thought about abstraction, who thought that it had to be realism. The color field school, I remember, but the discovery that in every color were hundreds of colors.
Mm.
But that once you made the discovery, you kind of became devoted to that. And the rest of the world started to diminish, or the peripheral world, as you focused on. And you saw that, as I mentioned, by looking in the sun, closing your eyes, and then moving your fingertips over your eyes, and you see that you can shift it from bright red to variants and of a theme. But those who then discovered the philosophical elements of hidden in everything, and then those filmmakers, the guy was talking about making this series called MacGyvers. Did you ever hear of that, Derek?
Mm-hmm. Well, you mean the show, MacGyver?
Yeah, there's a show called, for many years, called MacGyvers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or him in an interview, the guy who created it, and he said that way of thinking solved everything MacGyver had. The way that I couldn't find it on anywhere, on any service at all, or anything like that. But he said that somehow the way they had that show, they didn't presume anything or anything like that, but that somehow they had a way of looking at something.
Mm.
So then I said, let me try one of the series, and I couldn't find it at all.
Is it an older show? Or
I
is it
think
recent?
it's old and new. There's new versions and old versions of it.
So
Okay.
they did make a new one, and that looks like it's on Hulu.
Yeah. You have to pay for it?
Hulu, yeah, you need a subscription to Hulu.
Yeah, no, I have a Zoom, but I think even if you have a subscription, you have to pay for it. Or join a TV station or something.
And it looks like you can watch the old ones on, Pluto TV.
Pluto TV.
Also on Amazon Prime, actually, with your subscription. So
Amazon Prime, you have to buy Paramount.
Oh, okay.
Yes, they're all making a buck, aren't they? Well, I mean, I would say what we shared originally in the beginning was somehow you all of a sudden, for one split moment, you became Derek. You weren't Derek, you became Derek. There was a momentary you, and then a Derek who then has accepted Derekness as an expression.
Oh, yeah, that's nice.
Okay. Well, we came to that somewhat with Ursha, where you say, okay, we made a pizza of our life. We say we could play with time and space. And we see you do feel that you have some weird relation. We can kid around and say somebody up there likes me and all that. But it is somehow a relationship to the mystery. Sometimes it materializes as religion attempts to describe it, but somehow it's best as the mystery, because then somehow you have no motive. When it's a motive-oriented relationship, then you get the reaction to the motive. But when it is not a motive relationship, but there is actually an experience to the mystery, then there is resembles lovers glancing at each other, or children looking at their mom, or something like that, just for the split second or whatever. That you just, something that's there that's hidden in plain sight to others, but is there. So it's a semblance of that experience where you get a glimpse of the mystery. And I say, why? Because the more than the glimpse you have of the mystery, the more you introduce the mystery into what is happening, into the story.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Mystery, but mystery isn't happening like literal time. Mystery is more like it comes in the form of maybe sunlight in a situation. It's normalized. But then you see that you've normalized existence to the extent that the creative dimensions are missing. So you've made, and that's the sky. Yeah, that's the way the sun is, and that's what, you made it like outer space, everything. Yeah, right. And you've marginalized it. But in getting a glimpse of existence, you bring that glimpse back into the story with you. And you see that somehow, by its own nature, there is a conversation going on. And not only the body with itself and with you and this and that, and not only is there a dialogue and relationship and everything, but this remarkable creative process called life is happening in every aspect of what's taking place. And then we've normalized it around issues and the literal issues. And every time you literalize something, then you have to say, should I or shouldn't I? And as you literalize it, but seeing it from another perspective allows you a perspective, not around where doing and not doing is not the eternal issue. Is that somehow when there's a consciousness that you're caring for something, and there's something, even though it's not literally spelled out that you are caring for this, literal this, but that somehow you are caring for some quality, some process, some dignity, some grace, it comes in many forms. The perspective that one is caring for something has a resemblance to a pregnancy where somehow, without it being literalized or whatever, there is something as holy or important as you are. And that your survivals are entwined. I think when you become aware of a quality inside your being, you understand that it resembles a kind of creative pregnancy, where intuitively you're caring for that. Now I feel that this discovery of the human element in one's life, which is not historically bound, but exists more in dharmic time than karmic time, where there's a discovery, an event forces soul searching. And soul searching throws one enough of a loop where the continuum isn't there. Soul searching becomes what one is experiencing. Now, the one escapist aspect of the soul searching is then to literalize it. But there's an aspect of soul searching that is genuine, an exploration into a life that one has avoided. And you see that the search that one has been on is also based on the very avoidance of the very thing that one is searching for. And so you meet this balancing act in your own existence. when you meet the balancing act in your own existence is not such a possessive around identity. You see that aspects of one's life as an artwork. So now that when one has a perception that interrupts the status quo, one kind of re-enters their own story from a different place. But that one is free. And freedom isn't a license, it's a level of perception. That there is a dimension in one that cannot be held prisoner.
Hmm.
That must be offered, that must be shared. Because it doesn't exist if it's not perceptively shared. So I do feel that the next aspects of the situations are more related to this hey baby idea that we've been floating, which is an honest conversation from a sentimental place, we'll call it, or an affectionate place. Hey baby, do you want to try this thing? It's not a rehearsal, but is in fact usually comes when it kind of usually needs despair to ask honestly the question. And so therefore, if it visits despair and it asks that question, it no longer has fear of despair. You see that despair itself is in fact a creative element of the experience. It wipes away the history to some extent, or the continuum.
Hmm.
So let's say what the illusion is somehow that there can be enough of a hey baby that just opens up the doorway, obviously. Now that has happened to some degree in most of our lives. We've just been able to do something that would have been reckless or crazy or this or that. So there was something of a hey baby element that ran through it, or meaning that an invitation opened up a doorway that was kind of hidden in plain sight as being illogical or crazy or not being intelligent or having many of the social reasons for not being. But then somehow this interaction created something. And it seems then it had a creative purpose. So sometimes when one reviews their own life, they see a mystery to themselves. How did it make leaps from here to there? Or how did this go on to become that? And you see how little of it was decision making. And how much of it was naturalized. So you discover a world of naturalization. That when it's interrupted, it is no longer natural, but increasingly uncomfortable over the same thing. So you start to see the force field, once you're in that grill, without fully realizing it, you see that it's cooking. It's inherently shifting. You're in, but you still have the day-to-day. But you see in retrospect, the process was happening. You see your life processing. And it's not only processing things, you see that your whole life has been a process. And you're in middle, and you can see in retrospect what it was like when you were this age or that situation, the process you were in, and how you were taking it and how you were experiencing it. But at that time, it was literally happening to you. In retrospect, you see how your body was processing it And somehow there was confusion around the outer world that everyone else seemed at home with. But you also see that confusion was the intelligence, because there was many things and many times happening. It was lived on many levels. So confusion about your own existence is inherently part of the story that one is in until a discovery happens. Because up until that discovery, you think that you had a literal history. But from that perspective that frees the story, you see that it is fluid. And when you perceive it is fluid, you see that time and space is also fluid.
Right.
While you exist in one level of time and space that is literal, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. A literal time zone of continuity. But you also see it is moved in different levels of time. 1 day, 1 hour, 1 year, 1 century, all entwined. And somehow the being is capable of managing this remarkable creative process that is their life. And as one discovers elements of that life, it frees it from the literal story. And you start to see that life has not only been this literal existence, but it has in fact come about through, in fact, the dopey love affairs, and have been in fact remarkably creative expressions.
Yeah.
And that the everyday life is the spiritual life. And the dumb life and the happy life and all are correspondingly entwined. But independent of the person's perception of it, seen from outside of it, looking at it, one's life is creative as any movie to the audience watching it. To have the perception of the dimensions that run through the life, we'll call it then, is to have somehow God's perspective on what's happening. That is a literal thing. And it can be as dumb as your music, Derek, where you play something, you say, well, I don't know, Derek. So God says, Derek, I think you have to give it a bit more, what do you say? Would you hear God if God said, critique your music?
I would keep my ears open for
You
sure.
think so? You don't think you would complain? You don't think you would complain and say, what the hell? Where were you when I needed you?
Seems like it's here all the time.
Well, I'd like to be able to literalize it with a straight face, but basically it does seem that there's a difference between a religious being and religion. Because as they literalize it into survival, which I can't doubt, the religious being has a kind of relationship with the energy directly. And so they understand, even if there's a medium to it, that they're sharing something between them that allows access to that medium. So it may be a mystery to others looking at it, but basically it could be as dopey as just lying in bed with the kids and kidding around and making up a story and this and that. There's something that is trusted. And in the trust, it has access to a space. Now, I'm not only talking trust like this, like you do in the Egyptian, but trust that comes when people are in love and their bodies mesh, and there's a trust inherently, creatively in that must happen for the body to be able to do that for a period. Or it's called cuddling. I think that's what it was called in, that they made a difference between sensuality and sexuality. Sensuality didn't have the motive of sexuality in it, had more of a motive of a transmission of a oneness, or I and thou in it. So that's why cuddling with the child or feeding the child or whatever had a kind of I and thou element in it. And even sleeping with a love or something like that had an element of confidence, of the absence of fear, where one surrendered. And so somehow there was inherently in the body a trust or distrust or measurement. So you see that the experiences of the being are not just the literal experiences that we've literalized about growing up and what class we went to and this and that, but you start to see how nuanced the whole existence is. And that somehow there are moments where you stumble upon something that just opens up something that has been contained. And you see that the premise of the life is continuity, but the premise is also that that continuity will be interrupted so deeply that they see a parallel existence. So when the premise is continuity, it becomes a whole business then of continuing the life. I don't know if the life is in fact faked out, or whether it still has, somehow the inherent life seems to have its own integrity. And whether it leaves the body at a certain point will still be they say, look, you want to do AI for, you say, I'll catch you later. But you can have the body if you want. What do you think, Kai? Can I say that? Can I say, okay, you can keep my body, but I'm going to go now? Is one able to say that? No. Who was that just came on there?
Oprah, she's been on for a little while. She seems
Okay.
to be having trouble getting on with the camera, maybe.
Yeah.
If you have an Israeli woman living in Sicily, of course she's going to have trouble getting on. You could be living on Mars now. You know what I mean? Aren't they up on Mars? Somebody's up on Mars now. So I'll speak to you all for as if you're in outer space. Although I think that Santa Fe, New Mexico looks a little bit like Sicily also. But, we're out here in the countryside.
Yes, she is.
Yes, she's from outer space. Did you know that this old woman, Oprah, is speaking from outer space? How does it look from outer space, Oprah? How does it look?
No. Do you know? Oh my God, I made a mess. Actually, I have to get on.
Wait,
Oh boy.
it's because you were on twice, so you were feeding back. If you could just get your camera on and take the other one off.
Kai, you can also mute this one here.
Yeah, I could mute that one too if she comes back.
That was some noise, though, wasn't it? Hmm? What's happening? Is Carrie still on?
I don't know if Carrie's still on.
Okay, well, it's very laid back then. Is that okay?
Yes.
It's really,
Not actually a podcast sort of thing, is it there? But it is more kind of hanging out around the and in the hanging out atmosphere, or it is an immersive. And so some of the issues that can come up from hanging out to getting cancer to this and that to aloneness to at one point almost being immersed in magical thinking or wishful thinking and then logic thinking and seeing that one actually has the capacity to invoke many expressions or ways of looking at something. But none of these ways, you see that there are expressions that one has available to one, depending on where one is coming from. Because depending on where one is coming from allows one creative access into the story. If the ego is too overcome, then the energy won't allow it to enter into the story very deeply. So to visit the place, there is a surrender to some degree of the ownership of the story. Where the ownership means caring for something. It's like a landlord is caring for the property, not the owner. But they own it in order to care for it. That is a laughable premise of survival, but in fact, that is the true survival in the creative life or the art life. Is not the self promotion, but the art being true and touching. And true meant that there's a thou relationship to the art, that someone somewhere somehow sees it and is touched in the way that you were touched, and is something shared through time and space. The premise of the art experience was that it connected people of different situations for a moment. Even if they had different backgrounds or different experiences, they may have shared something in a shared movie that entered into their framework. So somehow seeing it somewhat from the movie meant that you saw the story a bit from a different place, from the movie's perspective. And then you also then started to see the world from the other person's perspective. When they were another, when they were a thou, when there was a relationship, when there was a love affair, it transcended the separation and made what appeared to be a separation into something beautiful and funny and goofy. But as the feeling is lost and it literalizes, you see that the very elasticity that comes in relationship with the love affair being there then becomes rigid. So let's say as one is creatively moving in this life in different forms and different attitudes, different identities that one has assumed and entered into different expressions or stories. What do you see there? Ba-boom, you arrive in San Francisco. What's the philosophy again?
Good question.
You still into it?
Yeah. Yeah. It seems okay, all of it, for the moment.
Do you feel you want to give it a shape or have, as I was discussing with Urja, give it a look, or not so much a futuristic, although that's your call, but not so much a future job or expression or something like that, but basically, let's say in some weird way you did re-enter the body now from this conversation. So then you have a Derek to work with.
Yeah.
But somehow you're entering into, now it may get lost in 10 minutes, but somehow for 10 minutes you have a sense that somehow, here's Derek, see if you can work with that. You're in San Francisco. You see possibilities. Well, then I say, okay, from this, the new Derek, I see that it's missing a couple of honest conversations. We're not honest so much because they'll kick my ass if I try to be honest. So I do have to come into this story more romantically creative rather than a stern. What do you think? You want to do stern dude or you want to do romantically creative?
Romantically creative feels more like a dance to me. That sounds
What do you think, Earth? You think he can do romantically creative? I don't know.
Uh,
He may need more hair than that.
what Derek just said sounds beautiful. It sounds more like a dance, he said. I like the image.
But is this too crazy? Is it possible to say to you, Urja, look, you see that supposedly this is the time you have, and that's how, depending on who sees you.
Yeah.
You're in a bottle of time. So
Yes.
someone walks into the room and you're in it, they see time in the room. Just as if they saw a baby on the table, they would see time in the room. So you can somehow measure time instinctively. Doesn't have to be literally around dying or whatever, but you can figure out by looking at a person how old they are to some degree, instinctively or essentially or whatever. So you see that there is cognition of this movement that's happening in life. It tends to literalize when one sees it. So it sees an old person or it sees this or a young person, but what you see is flux.
Yeah.
But you also see time in terms of the form that they're in. Okay. So seeing that, you see that that is happening, a flow is happening anyway, and that there are stages of the experience. We kid around and say, can one re-enter into the shape to some degree and see time as the more exploratory? And that you see that they're attempting to do that now with game playing and bingos and all this sort of stuff to get the mind alert or whatever. To get the whole place together and playing bingo together or doing something together or dancing together as a measure of giving somehow juices of continuity in it. So you see that there is a playing with time. And there is the theory, even if they literalize it now as for extended life, they are premising that if you take up hobbies or you become interested in this or that, somehow it's a healthy experience. And healthy experience meaning that you want to live. So their premise for you is that you want to live. If you say to them, you know, I'm thinking about maybe not making that's so positive an idea that I want to live. I may want to go and I may want to live. I'm negotiating that. You say, the doctor says, look, I can't go with you on that.
Yeah, I know, they won't go there.
Even though that's what's really happening. You say, you know, I'm negotiating now. Sometimes I'm into it, sometimes I'm not into it. And I say, well, you've been doing that all your life. And I say, yeah, and I'm still doing that. Sometimes I'm into it, sometimes I'm not into it. That's how I've navigated through the life. Okay.
Neti.
So then your doctor would want you to be into it.
Yes.
But then you would be afraid because they want you to pay more bills. that they have a motive. Well, now we have the offer of our local friend doctor.
Yeah.
Remember the woman who worked in the store with Mary there? Well, her husband is that doctor. So he's now just, if you need him anytime, you can just call him. He'll bicycle over.
Oh, that's so sweet.
I'll hang out for the day or whatever, and sort of stuff like that.
Well,
Is
with you in
I guess
person.
that's what he always wished to do anyway, but he was working in the emergency room and pretty tough. If you look at the emergency room movies, you see how tough it is there. But I think he just let that go, and he's going to do this now, bicycling over if he can,
Yes.
which is not bad then to have the doctor stop over for something. But we'll see. I haven't utilized it yet. You know, they offered that a long time ago to me. But you're right. The doctors, they usually don't, unless they happen to be in that situation themselves.
Yeah.
You know. But basically, I think that you're more managing the situation as you are. Did you? They say that. Well, how are you feeling?
Oh, you asking
Would
me
you-
the question?
Yeah.
Right now,
They
like,
do ask the question. Do you want to be saved?
no.
You know, in other words, they automatically come in and save you.
Yeah.
And so you may say, "Oh, that may be too rude that they you aren't fully dressed." And
Yeah, that has happened.
yeah, no, I know that has happened. I've seen it happen here. But basically, what I'm saying, what they say, if you don't want to be saved, put on your refrigerator in this green letters, "Don't save me."
I have a big sign saying, last wishes, no tubing.
You
Just
do?
No tubing, no intubing, you know, of any kind.
Yeah. Is that what they did last time?
No, but I want to make sure I had that in a good place so that if something happened to me, they can see that. And I don't want to be resuscitated.
Do they actually allow that? Don't they have to?
No, that's why I say you can get that on they say put it on the refrigerator. You can get
But
that from the point that
sometimes
you don't wish to say. You don't wish certain procedures to be done.
Hmm.
I've seen it in movies where they don't obey what the patients say. They just go for it.
Mhm.
They just save you automatically.
Yes.
Yes, that's what, but they say that they are required, they say here, to come in and save you. Unless you had required or requested not to be invaded like that. But I guess that, again, that is the call of the people coming in. What do you think, Urja? You've had quite a few times when they've saved you. What do you think yourself? How many times have you had where you got saved?
When it was serious, once in Santa Fe and twice in Boulder.
And were you conscious while you were unconscious?
I was half conscious, you know. I had not the strength to talk, but once it was a total nightmare, the way they handled it and how they were almost mean to me.
Wow.
Like, do you want to go to the hospital or not?
No, mean to you is how they get you pissed off enough to fight to live.
Oh, I
if the person seems undecided and you're the worker, they say something that makes them pissed off.
Okay.
But they say it's too short to get into the ambulance or something.
Yeah.
Or did you see her nose? Did you see what her nose looks like? You know. So they say that the person may get pissed off enough to say screw you. So screw you is a way of wanting to live.
I had the LGBT, and it was a nightmare. His face, so much makeup, and they were talking normally, like I didn't exist. And then when he put the needle, he jabbed it so hard.
Yeah.
That was shocking.
Yeah, no, if you do 100 a day, it may be automatic. So I
Yeah,
said, sitting around when they put that inside of me, that she was arguing on the phone with her boyfriend.
oh,
And I kind of was making jokes in order to kid around. And it was kind of weird and weird in its own way, you know. But at the same time, it was interesting to see
yeah,
the body. That's what I was saying in there. So let's say, not to make light of the life,
no,
because if you imagine, you say, holy shit, I don't know if I want to go through that. Then, so there is a weird time where what's normal to them is just a kind of treatment to you, and you okay. So it does make sense that the person comes in, a friend of yours comes by and happens to be a doctor and says you're okay with this or that. But then there's also where they say, the one doctor said that basically I have to continue the life. I can't help the person end the life. So let's say that if you're in that circumstance with people, you are in a very interesting space. And the Lord can protect it from being too stupid. But the Lord can also intercede too much in a human experience when people share something where the normalcy is dying. And then it's looking at the life from the dying perspective. And when it looks like the life from a dying perspective, it doesn't see permanence. It sees a kind of time that was hidden in the story. There was an interesting article in the Times the other day about this 40-year-old nun who teaches St. Benedict's Memento Mori, where every day you say a prayer for dying. That dying's in the room with you, like one of the relatives, and that and the acknowledgement of dying is in a Memento Mori. So I guess she's got quite a following, this woman. There's an interesting article on Thursday. But the premise, again, has been for centuries. This conversation has always been very personal. But when one had the question of dying, one also started to question the reason for living. And then you also saw that even though they would give you reasons for living, you saw that they were energies within the being. And that wanting to fade and wanting to live were very real sentiments. And that is happening very deeply. So what you say, Ursula? You don't see yourself going hiking?
oh yes, I do see myself going hiking. Yes, but the weather has been so bad. I mean, it was good. I mean, it rained a lot, it snowed a lot. The creek is gushing. It's just the first day we don't have a rain.
Yeah. Now it
Yeah.
gets warm again. Now it starts to get warm again.
Today's perfect temperature.
What they're having in New Mexico is an extreme drought. Even with the storms that may happen, they have an extreme drought. And so they're all predicting a tough time around that to some
And
degree.
it's cold in Santa Fe. I know. I mean, cool. It was in the 40 yesterday.
Well, today it's cloudy and beautiful.
Yeah,
But it's around 60, I would say.
that's perfect. Yeah.
60 degrees here. Okay, any questions at all, Derek or anyone out there?
Anybody on YouTube want to ask a question? You can type it in.
Okay. The question that we've been asking between us as friends is, as we're aging, as we're this, as we're that, can one experience the living and dying process, the simultaneity of it? And in fact, where we're having hangout conversations or immersive conversations of the normalcy of it. And then in seeing the normalcy of it, you're also seeing the remarkably creative job that the body and the agreement that went on into living.
Yeah.
That is kind of unknown to us unless something happens to the body and then you have to re-examine it from a different place. But if there's enough that forces you to soul search, you examine the body from a place that changes the whole nature of one's continuity. You start to see that the life was more of a creative act than it was a literal one. And as you perceive the creativity of one's own life, you see the story of the self releases the story to some degree. And you see that there's a parallel time, that living and dying are a phenomenon or a conversation that is happening in one's life, that the body is juggling living and dying. You meet yourself, but not as a possessive of self with a history. But the self that has other dimensions in its loss. You read a letter and you start to see a dimension that existed in the circumstance that was hidden in plain sight. And in it being revealed, it releases the story from its continuity. So I've used before where you discover your father is not your father, your mother is not your mother. They're human beings or people who happen to be your parents. The rest of the world may see them as people who happen to be your parents. You see them as parents who happen to be people. So there's a literal history that one has in their life, but a discovery of their peoplehood changes your history to mystery. You see, parallel to your literal life, there has been a mysterious life being lived. And you see that that life is supposedly made up of accidents and situations that took place this way. You see how unplanned much of it has been, how accidental, how it may be boy meets girl, or this love affair, or this feeling, or some feeling shifts the plane, or some incident, or some hurt runs through the story. But once you perceive it deeply, it is no longer has the momentum of continuity. As you perceive the momentum, you are no longer subject to it. You re-enter the life story from a different place. And not only talking about the feel-goodism of the moment, I'm talking about creatively. If you do something, now it's you doing it, not your mother and your uncle and this and that. They may be doing it more from memory, but no longer as dictated by one's survival. So as one perceives deeply, the story is freed from literal time. And you see you come more from mystery time than history time. And the essential capacity to create from, or to be from the creative lens is that one is inherently free. One is viewing the story from a free place. And free doesn't mean let loose. It doesn't mean that. It means true to the energy It means true to the, you see the creative thread that runs through it. And so one is true in their own sense to a creative urge that ran through their life. What do you say, Urja? Do you want to do another chapter?
Thank you, Danny.
Well,
Do I want to do another?
you want to do September, or you want to do a bit more than September?
Well, right now, a little bit more than September, maybe.
Okay, so let's say
3 days ago, maybe not.
another year, March. In human terms, we'll call it a year.
Yes. Okay.
So
Yes,
we'll call it 4 seasons.
that sounds sweet. Yeah.
4 seasons to play with. We'll both, okay, we can work with
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Derek, do you want to work with a 10-year program or
Oh, 40 years, bro.
30? Derek has 30 years?
Yes, at least.
No, I'm talking about that you can always renew. After a year, we can say, hey, I'm really into this. Maybe I'll do it. I'm saying that basically, however schmaltzy that sounds, that you can say, hey, I wouldn't mind trying this for 3 more years or something like that. And that somehow there is a conversation happening, even though it sounds dopey. It's a conversation that's not bad to have. Now there may be possibilities. It's highly unlikely, but I think they're trying different forms that we would have, we'll say, as friends, having an immersive conversation. You say, well, and having real conversations, but very goofy because the feeling would be there. So then you would be able to access certain elements in yourself. And I'm saying that what we are creating in immersive, that you can have that dumb conversation with yourself. And it doesn't have to be spooky or jumping off the bridge. It can be if you wish, if you want to do spooky. But I think you can do schmaltzy Urja and say, how's things going? I'll hang around for a year. We'll see where it goes. Or, Is that too dumb sounding?
No.
That one's idea of their body hanging out and this and that would have any impact on their body or them or the hanging out? What do you think? What do you think, Derek? That an Urja could say, okay, I'll hang out for a year, and say, right, as if that's going to matter.
I like that approach, actually. The time frame approach.
Well, that would be, I guess, if we talk to the doctor and you say, I think not interfering with the situation too much, but just buying some time to hang out. And, would that be an appropriate thing? Well, that's talking about living and dying, isn't it?
In a way, or an expiration, built-in expiration.
But as you're seeing also that you're passing much of it on to memory, that those who then come and look at your papers and everything like that will have had little very relationship to anyway. So you are this number. And then you have evidence in the world that you are a number.
I'm even more and more my birth date. Everywhere they ask for the first thing before your name.
So you start to see that more and more in the larger scheme of things. They want your numbers anyway. They don't want you so much, but they want your numbers. And okay. So you start to see numberhood to some degree.
Like Bitcoin.
So your life that you're living now is pretty much yours to live. The other part of the life is numberhood and just stuff out there. But you're going downstairs, you're taking a walk, you're doing that.
Shorty?
I think someone just pulled up there, didn't they?
Segway left.
Oh, Segway left, okay. Segway said that he's taking this course in 3D printing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Are you familiar with it, Derek?
Only a little. Lots of fantastical things are coming up with.
Good at it.
Chico has a 3D printer.
A 3D printer, yeah. So he says he's going to take the course in it, though. He's a week and he takes a course in it. And it sounded interesting. I think I don't know if he's doing jewelry or he's doing his own creations there.
He's so good. He's so talented.
He's good.
He's really good.
They're doing 3D printed homes now.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you make of it all?
I mean, they talk about it solving any homelessness problems, or because they can make these houses for so cheap. And they're deploying it in, I don't remember where, South America somewhere, Central America. Pretty fascinating. And then, I mean, it's just one application of it too.
Say that, could Mary take her? I'd like to take a picture of my doing that club exercise, but the shadow, I made it into more of a shadow movement. You know, so, and then as you look at the shadow, it kind of, it creates whole different forms of movement in it. But I was wondering, can Mary take a picture or a camera shot of the sun up against the wall and the shadows and stuff like that, and then have it out there? I'd like to see it myself, but is there any way we could put it on or send it out there?
Oh, that'd be nice.
Where
Well,
would you
if she
like to
takes
put
a
it?
video, we can upload it onto YouTube and put it in with your other videos.
Okay, she said, okay then. So maybe we'll try that. I wouldn't mind, because I wouldn't mind seeing it myself, how it looks from that perspective. But it is utilizing the shadow. It becomes a whole different thing then too. You know, you have a relationship to a different aspect of it, where you find out that the shadow has a kind of fluidity that you may not have had.
Mm.
You know.
Yes.
Yeah, that's nice.
But I'm also doing like, you know, the one movement in the Feldenkrais was where the head moved one way, the arms the other way, the knees the other way, and the hips the other way. You could do it fast or slow or strong or weak, but usually relaxed body. It was a way of deeply relaxing the body and then doing it from the relaxed body. But the eyes were moving that way. You were smelling, you were hearing. You know, so even there's an eye exercise I'm doing in a big tree in front of me where I'm hearing the birds in the tree, but you can't see them unless you look or you hear the sound and then you look for them. So I'm doing an eye exercise in the morning around hearing and seeing and stuff like that, just naturalizing it a bit more outdoors, you know, with the clubs.
Mhm.
And then I've also kind of added walking around, doing some of the club exercises or whatever. So it's, I think, a nice form there. But it may be, you'll let me know. I'll send you the picture. Maybe we'll just put it up and see how it looks.
Yeah, we could either do a slideshow with still photos or we could do a video. And then well, it's hard to put music under it because it's all copyrighted, but
Yeah.
come up to copyright issues with music.
Well, we can do something Lamont Young or Pranath.
Yeah, maybe.
Well,
Yeah,
if you look
probably not Lamont Young, maybe Pranath. He's probably, I don't know if he has people out there looking for his, they're pretty strict on YouTube with
oh,
copyright.
really? Yeah, really? You
Maybe
just,
Derek can make music.
yeah, Derek can make the,
Make the attempt. Those guys are pretty heavy hitters musically.
You can do it, Derek.
yeah.
Derek can do it. He's great.
Well, I think that you can,
Yes.
let's say say you had to make something right now. Okay.
Depends on the thing.
You could
There's
even
a guy- I think
indoors.
there's a guy, what's his name there? He speaks for 64 hours. Says the same words over and over again.
Like a mantra.
Well, that's Lamont Young did stuff like that too. You know, do you know his stuff, Lamont Young? But there is a Lamont Young, I think, on YouTube that is together with Pranath. So then that was the premise for us then when we were younger, because they were coming in with silence being the basis for the music. But then he came in, they say, no, the Indian sound at that time was silence coming into the music. It didn't have a score like that.
Isn't it John Cage you work with that? With the silence?
Came from from silence. That was the basic, and a lot of dancers also came out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Who was the partner to John Cage's guy that
Merce Cunningham.
Hmm?
Merce Cunningham.
No, not Merce Cunningham.
You mean the painter?
No, there was Guston. He did. The fellow did something around the painter Guston, who was reworking his career. There was an overlapping of people who were bringing music to writing, to words, to seeing, that they saw inherently in the object that there was a sound.
Yeah.
Whatever. And so there was a lot of experimentation around that time. So I think that the introduction, remember at that time was where Pranath came into he was staying on 2nd Avenue. There was a bunch of Indian guys who were broke. Even the Hare Krishna guys, everyone was just hanging out. So you can just hang out. So there were lots of people who were then going to become famous and musicians and this and that, just hanging out and then doing a spin-off of that experience and taking it into their own situation, And so this, when they introduced the Indian music, they introduced music as an immersive. Not as it being played, but somehow that it was the breeze and the wind, and it was also an example of that happening. So there was an immersive element to it, that as you became used to it, it wasn't so much based on the score, but as you became involved in the immersive, you started to have realizations. Where the music just came, it unfolded. So the premise was then that you entered into process. And that your natural day then became a process. So that somehow there was a combining of naturalness into a creative expression. And you would have somehow a perception of how someone perceived you. When you weren't literally surviving, but how they perceived they saw you creatively. They saw the creative you separate from the literal circumstance that you were in. And you saw how actively people were keeping something together, even as the tones were changing, even as the elements were changing in it. So you would be able to perceive that it wasn't always exactly together, that things were in flux. So perceiving that gave birth to certain fluxus movements, certain movements that saw the flowing happening in the life, or showed the processes that were happening in one's life. And then you saw inside the form the creative expressions that discovered the creative process. And when you discover the creative process, your history is no longer karmic. Your history then has romantic elements, has creative elements into it that releases the story. And in releasing the story, your life is also released. So then Anerja can find herself at 81, then pondering life there, measuring, shaping something, getting rid of something, and seeing that all of them, where you get a peep of your own existence from the other side of the mirror. And you see the processes you're in, and you're still a person, a citizen in the world who is surviving or whatever. But your perception of a situation is closer to the dream life than the literal life. And why? So you thought that it really happened. You really thought that you went to Rajneesh in Oregon, and That was a movie you saw.
It's very strange the way I see it now. It's almost like it's another me that doesn't exist anymore. I don't know. It's
Yeah. What do you think? Was she crazy?
Thank you, Mary.
Okay, this is nuts. Well, it's pretty nice though. Are you enjoying it? It's okay.
Totally,
Sky?
totally.
So it's more our thing here, but it's kind of given the schmaltz of life, the
Yes.
spiritual aspect of life, and this journey that we've shared. And you still seem into it.
Yes, very much right now.
Should she hang out longer, Kai?
She seems pretty vibrant, so I would say yes.
You know, why don't you go and play Powerball next week,
Okay, I'll do that.
Friday, just because
I know
think,
exactly where to get my ticket.
yeah. Oh no, not Powerball, Mega Ball, Mega
Mega Ball. Okay.
Millions, Mega Millions.
Do that.
Just because of the goofiness of it.
Yes.
But that place is only a few blocks away from you, right? So it's a nice walk there.
Yeah, I have a neighbor. She made $700.
Oh, she.
Yeah.
Well, I only got 3 numbers and 2 numbers. You know, but so I think $10 each. But we'll see. Okay, namaste, everyone.
Namaste. Thank you, Danny.
Hope everyone I can't see is okay, and take care. See you tomorrow, Derek.
And thank you, Guy
Thank you, Arja.
and Derek for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kai. Take care.
See you soon.